Lizzie Harrison for Card Player TV, and today we're here to talk about 3-betting preflop with Jon Friedberg. Thank you very much for stopping by, Jon.
Thanks for having me, Lizzie.
So I've heard a lot of times the third raise preflop is always aces or kings. Does that really hold true?
Well, it depends on the player, but I'm finding that a very good strategy these days is to use the 3-bet preflop in order to, put pressure on opponents, because typically when people think of a third bet preflop, or I should say second raise,
right.
That usually means aces, kings, sometimes queens, and so on. But when you 3-bet somebody, and when I say 3-bet, I'm referring to being in position,
okay.
Not somebody raising in late position and 3-betting from the blinds.
Not squeezing.
But I mean, when you're 3-betting with position on somebody, it's a great play because not only are they now forced to make a decision on if they want to play a hand against you, when you could possibly have a bigger hand than them, but they're forced to play it out of position. So I personally have been using 3-bet preflop lately more for bluffing than I previously used to.
So the caliber of your hand doesn't have to be that good for you to put 3-bet in?
For the most part, yes. I mean, obviously there's different situations. If somebody raises under the gun and I'm under the gun +1, and I 3-bet there, I probably have a much stronger hand than if somebody raises on the cutoff and I 3-bet on the button.
Right, that makes sense.
And for the most part, typically if somebody 3-bets in second position after an under the gun raiser opens a pot, they usually have a strong hand. And the contrary to that is when somebody raises on the cutoff and somebody 3-bets on the button, which doesn't necessarily mean they have a good hand, but just generally speaking, if somebody raises in early to middle position and it's folded to me and I'm on the cutoff or button or something, and I look down at maybe a small pair, maybe suited connectors, I used to just either call or fold, and now I'm much more often I'm putting in a re-raise just to do two things. First of all, force the opponent to make a decision, and in order for him to 4-bet there, he really needs to have a very strong hand. So
absolutely.
A lot of times, with a middle pair, maybe he has 7s, 8s, 9s, 10s, or even jacks, he's probably just going to call, and sometimes even fold.
What caliber of hands do you expect to drive out when you put a bet in there?
Well, it obviously depends on the player, but the one thing you can do is really get a sense for where you're at. If the person that you're re-raising, puts a fourth raise in or a fourth bet in, obviously they're telling you they have a very strong hand, but more often than not they're just going to call there. They're going to fold there because they don't want to play out of position. And then when they do just call, you usually have a pretty good sense of where they are, which I would say typically in some of the bigger tournaments, a hand to call there with might be, ace king, ace queen, middle to high pairs. But a lot of times if they're just making a play with like an ace 10 or maybe any other suited ace like an ace 7 of hearts, for example, or even like a 10 jack and you put in the second raise, a lot of times they're going to fold there and you'll just win the pot outright.
What about from out of position? Is it ever right to 3-bet when you're really not in a good position? Say you limp and there's a raise and another raise, and does that ever make sense? Maybe make your opponents think you limped with like your big hands?
Generally speaking, I don't think that's a very good idea to do.
It puts you in a dangerous spot.
I mean, it puts you in a dangerous spot. I think the best time to do that is when you're raising all in.
Okay.
Like, let's say you're on a short stack or something, and or if you're squeezing, in which case, again, I think all in is the best play there. But let's say there's a raise in late position, and you look down and you have any two cards, and you're on a short stack, and you think your opponent is just making a play at the pot. I think it's okay to re-raise there, but the problem with that is, let's say you re-raise the guy and you're still leaving yourself with chips. Like, let's say you re-raise for 25% of your stack, and now he calls and you have nothing, and you flop nothing.
Then
a lot of times you still have to make a continuation bet, and then that's another 25 to half of your stack, and now suddenly you've just bluffed off a lot of chips for no reason. So I don't generally like re-raising out of position without a hand, unless I'm just going all in which case I don't have to continuation bet, and that way you might think your opponent's on a bluff, and hopefully he is, but if he calls, all the action's already done, and you don't have to worry about getting outplayed post flop.
Right. Great. That makes sense. Thank you very much for coming by today, Jon.
You're welcome.
I'm Lizzie Harrison with Jon Friedberg for Card Player TV.